Hey everyone, welcome back to Brothers of Time. Today we're diving into chapters 1 to 11 of The Eye of the World. I'm going to keep it spoiler free at the beginning, just a solid walkthrough of what happened so far before we move into the spoiler section. So, Louis, where do we start?
We start in the Two Rivers, quiet, peaceful area. Randall Thor and his father Tam are heading towards the village at Emmonsfield for the Beltane Festival. Nothing exciting ever happens there.
Except Rand spots something very wrong on the way in.
Yeah, there's this black cloaked rider just watching him, creepy. And Rand's got that feeling, that when someone's looking at you, but what you turn and they're gone.
Yeah, and the weird part, he tells his dad, but Tam can't see anyone. That's when you know something's off.
They reach Emmonsfield and we meet Rand's two best friends, Matt Cawthon, who's always scheming. This time he wants to let a badger loose on the village green.
And Perrin Ibarra, the quiet, thoughtful one who definitely overthinks things.
And then we get some other newcomers. Tom Merrilin, Gleeman, who rolls into town like a rock star, and this mysterious highborn lady, Moraine, who starts handing out silver coins to Rand, Matt, and Perrin. No explanation.
Yeah, and with her is Lan, who's got this colour shifting cloak and just oozes, I can kill you in 3 moves.
Meanwhile, there's drama in the village. A peddler, Palam Fane, turns up. He starts spouting news about what's going on. There's a guy claiming to be the Dragon Reborn. Everybody in the village freaks out. They assume it's all someone else's problem.
Big mistake.
That night, everything goes to hell. Tam thought he and Rand should go back to their farm in the Westwood, and it's there that they're attacked by Trollocs.
Meanwhile, Trollocs attack Emmonsfield too. And when we say attack, we're talking burning houses, people screaming, it's absolute chaos.
Rand barely escapes the house and finds his father wounded in the woods nearby. But that's not even the weird part.
No, because Tam's feverish. He starts rambling and he starts talking about some really weird stuff, some big stuff, something about a baby found on a mountain wrapped in strange cloth.
And Rand has no idea what it means. He can't stop to think about it. He's got to get to the village for help.
So he rushes back to the village and he seeks help from Nynaeve. So she's the village wisdom and she's the person that everyone goes to be heals. She is sad though. She says, there's nothing I could do for him. He's beyond my help.
Rand seeks out the mayor, Bran Al'Vir, that's Egwene's father, and he eventually remembers that the Aes Sedai can heal. And Lady Moraine is one of those.
She doesn't just heal. All night in Emmonsfield, she has been wiping out the Trollocs using the one power.
Drawing on what little strength she has left from her all-nighter, plus Tam's surprising reserves, she heals the nasty wound he received at the hands of a Trolloc blade.
And then she drops the bombshell. The attack wasn't random. Someone was looking for Rand, Matt, or Perrin.
Which means they cannot stay. If they do, the village will burn again.
So that night, they leave everything behind. Rand, Matt, Perrin, Egwene, and even Tom the Gleeman go off with Moraine and Lan into the night.
And that's where we'll leave it for now. A bunch of small town kids on the run, no idea what's coming next.
And absolutely no way back.
Chapter 11 ends with the group arriving at Tarren Ferry, their way out of the Two Rivers, and hopefully safety from the Trollocs, Fades, and a Drakkar, who we see at the end of Chapter 10. More Shadow Spawn, kind of like a flying scout, and they're all chasing them.
It really feels like the group are in a spot of bother.
And now we move into the spoiler section.
Yeah, so if you haven't read the rest of the book or the rest of the book series, stop listening now.
Okay, so in each of these podcasts, we're going to be spending a bit of time talking about the characters that are introduced in a particular section. This is going to be a slightly longer section today in this episode. I don't think there's another section where we meet so many of the main characters in one go. I think you're going to start, Ol, yeah?
Yeah, so let's go. So these next characters are all the point of view characters later in the story. And what we'll do is, as Lou said in these sections, we'll introduce anyone who comes in who's a really important character. So we'll start off. Louis, you got the first one?
So Rand al'Thor, really important character. He's introduced as a protagonist. He's a central point of view character throughout the series. We start seeing him as this kind of sheep herder. He helps his father out on the farm. Later, it's funny, he gets called by people in his life wool-headed sheep herder. Lan calls him sheep herder right from the beginning as well. And you see kind of an innocence in him. He's not the only one who's kind of in this child mode. They're all kind of a bit innocent. They've always lived in the Two Rivers, he and his friends. And Ollie's going to talk about his another one of his friends in a second. But the Two Rivers people, and Rand is one of these, are just so innocent. And we're going to see a kind of massive character develop in all of them. Rand especially, he by the end of the series is kind of like a godlike character. He can do anything really, and yeah, so it's nice when Ollie and I have been reading this back that you kind of see him in these early stages as kind of questions about the world. Really doesn't know so much. And they've hardly stepped out of the Two Rivers at all. He is also, I should point out, one of the 3 Ta'Veren. We're going to talk about Ta'Veren later as well.
And it's also really interesting. I don't think in any fiction story that I've ever seen a character grow and develop as much as Rand does in these 15 book series. So it really is, whenever you reread these books, it's lovely to see him at the beginning here, like you said, in child mode. It's really interesting. The next character we'll talk about is Matt Cawthon. He's my favorite character, and he's one of Rand's 2 best friends. And again, he becomes an absolutely significant point of view or POV character later as well. And I think in these early chapters, you see bits of his love for women. He does fancy lots of women. He does lots of pranks. Louis mentioned earlier, he released a badger into covered in flour, or I might be getting that mixed up with Game of Thrones. Lots of pranks and card games, and his sort of like luck. Because later in the series, as this is a bit of a reread, as you know, he becomes the luckiest person ever. So you see a little bit of that. I actually found him a bit annoying in this book. He turns into my favorite character, as I said, but in this first book, he is just really, really annoying. But he's got a really clear view of wanting to protect the women of Emond's Field. And that does really start to flow through later in the books. You can see that that's a real driving force for Matt, is that he wants to look after, and he's, as you said earlier, he's the second of the 3 Ta'Veren.
Yeah, if we ever get to talk about the kind of TV series alongside this, they do that quite well. They kind of bring in that side of him that we then end up liking a lot. They bring that into the early episodes, don't they? Because yeah, you've invested this time reading the books, and you're willing to grow with Matt. But I think for TV, it works better that you kind of see what a cool character he is at the beginning as well. So I'm going to talk about Rand's other best friend, Perrin O'Bara. He's a major point of view character as well later on. In fact, that's like right in the middle of the series, books that seem to almost be like exclusively from Perrin's point of view. They're not quite, but it does sometimes feel like that. At this stage, he's quite quiet, and that's kind of his nature. He's that way throughout. He's a thinker. He kind of always approaches problems and tries to not rush into things. He always takes his time. He might be a bit reserved in nature, so perhaps in these early parts we're kind of more focused on Rand, more focused on Matt. But yeah, he's the third of the 3 Ta'Veren, and he's a really, really important character later in the series as well.
Yeah, he's really important. And then we've got Egwene Alvera. I never know how to say these names, saying them probably wrongly. So she's kind of Rand's childhood girlfriend, and she is obviously like all these characters, an absolutely huge character in this series, big point of view character later. And there's the love interest between Rand and Egwene. They sort of clearly are in a relationship, and that is a really important part of this first book, and how that kind of eventually sort of starts to kind of fall apart in a way. But yet there's always this kind of love between them all the way through to the end of the series, when ultimately Egwene has her big sacrifice. That there's still that kind of connection between the 2 of them. And I always sort of felt, I kind of almost hoped when I first read it, I kind of hoped they might get back together. But it also is interesting when it comes to any kind of relationships in these books. There's this kind of almost Victorian proprieties type thing around how, all the having the dresses the right length and sitting on a horse properly. And it is sort of quite strange when you compare it to some other books like Game of Thrones, where it's completely the opposite. So that's quite some people don't like that, but talk about love interest. I thought that was useful mentioning there. Rand is very protective towards her in these first chapters. He wants to look after her horse and make sure she escapes. And when they get separated, he's distraught that he's separated from her. But actually, you really start to see the leadership from her coming out in these early chapters. And she doesn't take any shit from the boys at all. And actually, her future arc, where she becomes the leader kind of the world, it is really nice to see those early developments here in these first chapters.
Yeah, definitely. Just that made me think what you were saying about kind of almost how awkward Rand is. Like they're kind of boyfriend and girlfriend, but friends definitely. And then he's finding as they've aged, and she's now marriageable age, he's marriageable age at the same time. It's kind of a bit awkward sometimes, just like how to talk to her and things like that. So, and she doesn't take anything from those boys. She's kind of understudy to Nynaeve, who I'm going to talk about in a second as well. And yeah, she's kind of taking the lead from Nynaeve. This is how you deal with young men, definitely. So Nynaeve, the next character, see a lot about from her perspective later on in the series. She's my favourite character. She, at this point in the first book, she's the wisdom of Emond's Field, and that kind of means that she is there to heal everybody's ailments. She's on the Women's Council. She's kind of like where people go for justice, but also kind of advice and all sorts as well. In these early stages, you start to see kind of her ability with the power, although it's not explicitly called that. At this stage, she can listen to the wind and things like that. Her kind of moral compass is very strongly right or wrong. She's a bit older than Rand, Matt and Perrin, but she's been kind of telling them how it is all these years, and so they kind of look up to her and respect her as well. But she's really fond of everybody, Egwene especially, and she's got a link with Egwene. We'll probably talk about in another episode. It's really, really cool. But yeah, she's protective of the kids as she sees them still, even though they're kind of grown men and women now. And that theme continues right to the end of the series.
And it is interesting also. She's another one of those characters with this huge growth, and she is like so powerful, isn't she? When you actually start getting into the kind of, they will start getting their magic and stuff. She is just so powerful, and there are some bits where her and Rand, when they cleanse Sidin, Rand and Nynaeve, the two of them with these massive statues. Is that the ones with the statues? Yeah, it is. These two hugely powerful channelers with these massive statues doing some immense stuff, and I think there's a massive battle after that as well. Anyway, so she is super badass. And then there's obviously Moraine the Aes Sedai, who comes at the beginning, and she's this kind of Gandalf figure. She's again a key point of view character later. She's not quite as big as the ones we've mentioned already. She has a few point of view chapters, but not as many as the others. Although she does almost have a whole book to herself, which is called New Spring. So yeah, as I said, she's kind of Gandalf. She's the kind of turning up in the Lord of the Rings as the wizard, and she's all seeing, she's all knowing. The kids are completely in awe of her. But it's a really interesting evolution for her as well, because as the kids grow into these kind of like king, god, queen type characters, she actually sort of diminishes. And there's some really interesting chapters later on where she's almost being subservient to Rand to try and get him to trust her, which is really, really interesting. I think they did that quite well in the show as well. But yeah, she's kind of like a god in these chapters to the kids. They're a bit unsure of Aes Sedai, and some of them, they got the dark friends at the early stages, but no, she's a really good character so far in this early bit.
Oh, she makes some good sacrifices, doesn't she? And one of them is epic and total rock star. Fantastic kind of end to one of the books, about like 3 or 4 books time from where we are anyway.
And that is so true. Actually, I think how Robert Jordan ends all the books is just incredible. They're all, by the time you're there, all the threads that have come together to create these epic endings. He's so epic.
Yeah, yeah. Her warder, Lan Mandragoran, Alan Mandragoran. We call him Lan, much easier. His kind of backstory is origin story, people call it, don't they? He is the king of Malkir, but Malkir as a kingdom doesn't exist anymore. It's been taken over by the Blight and the Shadow, basically. So he was smuggled out as a child as that was happening. There are other Malkiri about, but they've kind of been subsumed into the other borderlands, so Shinar and Arafel and places like that we'll find out about on the map. And basically all these borderlanders just think he is a god kind of thing. They're just waiting for him to come back and be king, but he doesn't want to be king. But he's a cool guy.
Yeah, no, he's cool. He's got a great arc, hasn't he? And some big fights on his hands, and he's kind of looking after all the boys throughout the series is sort of like is an interesting bit as they again evolve through. So the next character that is a minor point of view character is Padan Fain, who is the peddler. So when you read it for the first time or on a reread, it does seem a bit off. and he seems a bit kind of off in terms of as a person. And obviously, it's later revealed that he's got quite a darker role. He's clearly a dark friend, which you learn by the end of the book. I think even in the book, he sort of it almost has got spider-like characteristics, kind of climbing in and sneaking into places and things. And I think he's quite a strong link for me. So Padan Fane is almost a real link to the horror, kind of almost like when I say horror, I mean like horror movies. Like Jordan writes good horror movie type stories, and he's the one of the horror movie ones. And he becomes a bit like, again, we said God quite a few times, but he becomes like this kind of God type figure as well. But really, like almost all seeing. He gets mashed up with the mist, doesn't he? The mashed deer, and sort of becomes part of it. And also interestingly, whilst he's completely and totally evil, I was never that sure that he was actually on the side of the Dark One. He's sort of doing evil things, but it seemed he had his own agenda. That, frankly, by the end of the story in the final battle, he's kind of doing his own thing, and actually,
You'd say he's definitely against kind of Rand, but he's not on the side of the Dark One, as it were. And kind of Rand's got to fight the Dark One, but Padan Fane or Mordeth or Ordeith, all these names he goes by, and that mist, they've got their own agenda, and they're not good.
Yeah, they're not help. They don't seem to help, because they could have been a massive help in the last battle, couldn't they? To the kind of lieutenants of Demandred and all that sort of stuff. But they kind of just do their own thing and turn up at a random point and start killing everyone, eating all of them. Anyway, yeah. But and then the final one we're going to talk about, Lou, is Tom, isn't it? Which I think you're going to just cover off shortly.
Kind of Glee Man mentioned earlier. So yeah, before that he was a court bard. He goes along with the group. He kind of came to Emmons Field that's his job, to make a bit of money, but they get attacked by Trollocs, so he's kind of looking for something else. He's a really good mentor for at least two of the boys, the young men, Rand and Matt. He seems a bit grandiose and twee in these first few chapters, but yeah, you definitely see his character develop a depth as well later on. And what I love is kind of how you're surprised by he ends up linked romantically with Moiraine, another obviously brilliant character we just talked about. But in this first book, The Eye of the World, he kind of wants to avoid her. He's not sure about Aes Sedai, and then Moiraine turns up whilst he's talking to Egwene and Rand, and then he's right, I'm off then, kind of thing. And that's just like a little foreshadowing of kind of this strong feeling that he has later from Moiraine as well.
And I think also because they gentled his nephew, didn't they, as well? Was it his nephew they gentled? So I think he probably also doesn't. Oh, and that's right. And so it's sort of this real depth of his why he starts off with this story. But I mean, it's mad, isn't it, in terms of what he can do with his knives and stuff and his juggling. He almost seems superhuman in terms of his abilities, and he uses them either to entertain people, and almost like when he talks, it's a bit like he's somehow magically talking and amplifying his voice.
Because the Aes Sedai can do that, can't they? They can use the power to kind of project their voice and make them sound like they're coming from all corners of a big kind of area. He kind of just does that, doesn't he? By projecting, by doing it in high chant, whatever. But he's really cool. A good fighter.
He's surprisingly good fighter, isn't he? And then there are an absolute load of other characters that you meet who come back to lesser degrees. So Tam Althor, Rand's father, is really important, and he's probably the most important of the other ones. Then you've got the mayor, which is Bran, and a few other bit part characters. Egwene's father is Bran. You've got Senbui, and you've got the kind of like Coplins and the Congas, who I always thought was a bit of a quote towards the Sackville Bagginses or the Proudfeet, the sort of almost the bad hobbits and things. And even there's quite a bit around the horses. They all seem to have personality. So you've got Aldieb, who's Moraine's horse. You've got Mandarb, who's Lan's horse. You've even got Bella.
When the Trollocs attack Tam and Rand, she gets away before they end up coming to the village. And then the villagers see Bella and they're like, oh, what's happened to Tam and Rand? She's, let loose. I hope they're okay, kind of thing. I like her story as well. And yeah, she's great horse. Matt, he's really good with horse flesh, as he calls it, because his dad's like that's part of his work. But yeah, horses come up a lot, and there's all these words where you just say horse, but it's like bay mare, this and that, and and Jordan just knows them all. He uses all of these, where to us simpletons, it's just a horse, isn't it? So should we move on to the official POV counter, because it is pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're gonna do this every podcast. We're gonna slowly count up all the POVs that you've had, because I think there's about 2,000, according to Google, there's 2,700 characters who've got a name in the Wheel of Time series, and I think according to Google as well, there's 148 point of view characters. So that means 148 people that you're inside the head of. So we're going to count them up, and at the end of this podcast series, we're going to get to 148 or not. So let's see how it goes. So currently, so yeah, how many have we got so far, Louis?
What, in this first 11 chapters? Just the one. It's just Rand. Yeah, I had to reread them just to double check. It can't be, but because knowing how much it kind of changes about. You've got a theory on this. Maybe Jordan started it out thinking, oh, this will be a single point of view character story, and then 14 books later, obviously, along the way somewhere, he had to think, this has got to change a bit.
You can definitely see some things that he's trying out in this first book that he kind of, almost abandons, like the bits around the coins. I don't think they ever use those coins tracking people thing. That never seems to come up again. But I wonder if his plan was to have fewer character point of views, and it obviously got to the point where he needed to talk about things, and it started. And I guess when they split up later on in this book, after the Shadow Logoth, he's got no choice. So it's but no, it does. I think sometimes for me, I mean, it's a great thing to have all these different point of view characters, but it can sometimes feel, you get to the end of a chapter, it's really exciting, and it moves on to another point of view. It can be a bit of like momentum. You'd be like, oh, but actually, you're pretty quickly back into their world, aren't you? So
it's kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of remember where he left off with Matt or whatever, and he's done that really, really well. I think I've heard him say about he liked that vagueness of distance, be it temporal or spatial, where people don't know everything and you're hearing stuff secondhand all the time. And even the White Tower, this amazing kind of in charge of the world place with all the Aes Sedai in it, they later on they don't know half of what's going on, and that everyone's kind of operating under these under a bit of ignorance sometimes as well, and that's kind of a cool trick. So
I think so. What we can say for starters here is, so for the first official Brothers of Time POV count, we're now at 2: Lews Therin and Rand al'Thor.
The Dragon Reborn.
So I think so that's good. So we'll keep you updated and see how far we get, and definitely in the comments tell us if we've missed a point of view. We're going to have read all of these or listened to all of these before we make these podcasts, so they might sometimes be a little bit far apart, but we will keep you updated. So we're now going to move on to a bit where we do some foreshadowing and look at some of the Easter eggs or things that are exciting from future books that are foreshadowed or hidden away in these first chapters. And I think, Louis, you're going to start with a bit of a description of Rand, his backstory, and some of the prophecies that we're getting in this space.
Yeah, well, as we've mentioned before, Rand, we see it all from his perspective in these first 11 chapters. He is such a pivotal role in this entire series. Later, we find out he's the Dragon Reborn. There's maybe a few points in this early bit where we kind of get an inkling of that. When Tam is cut by the Trolloc blade, he's having these fever dreams, basically rambling about finding a baby on the slopes of Dragonmount, and how he and his wife Carrie had always wanted children but hadn't had any. So this, take him home, bring him up as their own. And he's always believed, obviously, Tam is his father, and now early on he's starting to doubt that, even though he doesn't want to believe it. He's doubting his own true heritage. Another thing, Tam, he's obviously done so much for him. He's a father figure for Rand, and he brings out this sword when they're back in the farmhouse just before the Trollocs attack. That Rand didn't even know his father had a sword, and it comes in real handy when the Trollocs attack. Tam's got this past that we don't know about, where he can obviously use it, and he's been out there fighting and surviving throughout, and that's kind of foreshadows Rand's own journey, because he too becomes a blade master later on. Tam's also taught him this flame and the void trick, which is kind of possibly linked to channeling. There's an argument there that could be said for that. It's definitely a focus that by being able to master this, Rand is able to master maybe a different skill in terms of channeling, but it comes to him obviously naturally. He's the Dragon Reborn.
And they all seem to use it, don't they? In terms of like, not all of them, but like, it's a thing. It's like a two rivers thing. Like, so they're all really good at shooting the bows, aren't they? They're all really, really amazing archers. And I think the Flame of the Void is how they do that. So it's fascinating to see how they use their that within their sort of, and Rand uses it when he starts to channel as well.
Yeah, and Tam is kind of the best at it, and he's taught Rand because Tam kind of wins the archery competition every single year. And Rand's like, I'm quite a good archer as well. Maybe I'll place this year. Yeah, looking at his status as a dragon, he's Ta'Viren. That means he's obviously got this. Ollie's going to talk about Ta'Viren later, but like this pattern's got a pull on a specific pull on him. We know that the shadow is after him. He's got this kind of slightly mysterious heritage. He doesn't look like any of the other villagers. They're all kind of dark-eyed, and he's quite pale. And he's got kind of he's taller than most. Perrin's quite tall, but he's even almost like a head taller than Perrin as well. He seems to be who Moraine kind of is looking to first and foremost of the three Ta'Viren. But that becomes clear later on as well. We definitely know that the attack on the Two Rivers was targeted. His instincts, leadership, dreams, they're already hinting at something greater. So maybe when we first read this, you might find this as well, that, this might seem like background detail. Jordan is so good at the detail, and you think, oh, it's background stuff. But on a reread, all of this starts to help us kind of think, oh, I should have guessed it from the beginning. This is all foreshadowing to when he's the Dragon Reborn.
100%. Those factors are hidden away on their own, but when they come together, there's only one answer there, isn't there? And it's super clear. He is the Dragon Reborn. So if I move on to the Aes Sedai foreshadowing and sort of bits that we get from this first chapters. So I think, obviously we meet Moraine and Lan, and Moraine Sedai is an Aes Sedai. So I think the first thing you really notice, apart from her being mysterious, is that she's an absolute badass fighter. So you don't actually see it in these first chapters. You come with Rand after he's brought his dad back, and you hear secondhand how amazing she was, fireballs and Land with his sword and stuff. So, but you start, so you don't actually see the one power being used in a battle, but don't worry, that's definitely coming, which because you're in the spoiler section. So I think at the end of this first book, Rand kind of destroys a whole army himself with his own one power. As I said earlier, when Nynaeve and Rand cleanse Sidin, with those massive statues, that's just incredible amount of Sidin, incredible amount of power. When they tame the wind with the bowl of wind, so the one power is starting to be shown to us here, but if you've read the book, so lots more is coming. And I would say that Robert Jordan absolutely nails battle scenes really well. He writes them incredibly well.
A little tie-in as well to the TV series. They do that quite well, even in the first episode, don't they? That kind of crumbling of the Wine Spring Inn as she's using all of the stones to kind of hurl at the Trollocs, and it's like a dance. You watch it, it's like a dance, and I think they actually showed what would be quite difficult. We have to imagine it, don't we, as readers? They show this kind of power as these threads, which looks so cool.
It's totally cool. She also has these weird coins, and again, I mentioned this earlier, but these coins don't seem to come back later. So she gives all the boys a coin, and all the way through this book, she's using it. A couple of them lose their coins, or they pay them to the guy on the boat. She's able to track them, and that sort of tracking of people using it and a coin was something that Robert Jordan put in, but it's almost like he forgot about it. You get to see a bit of the bond between Lan and Moraine. So it's at this stage only a real glimpse into it. They seem like they're almost in a relationship, but like an old married couple type relationship in some respects. But you get to understand what warders can do later, and I love it actually when you actually go inside the warder bond, which I think the first time you really start to see that is when the Asherman and the Aes Sedai are sort of bonding each other, and you sort of see what it does to you to be inside a bond, which is absolutely fascinating. And you also get the Elaine Min and Avienda bond, because they all love Rand. It's a bit of a weird bond, but that warder bond. Just to finish off the Aes Sedai bit, you see clearly we're supposed to think that Aes Sedai are not. Some people think they're evil, and the whole village is skeptical, and they don't trust Moraine and the Aes Sedai. And I love this bit, how you see the political nature of this story, the kind of huge world building he does, and actually you're never really sure who's on whose side. We know there's on the face, it seems to be such a light versus dark book, but it's so grey, and you're never really sure if people, even on the side of the light, are actually acting in the best interest of Rand and the other characters that we're interested in. And then obviously, clearly, she's on a massive mission. You find out later in New Spring that her and Shuan Shanche, were there when the prophecy was sort of when Rand was born, and then that older blue sitter or whatever she was sort of dies as she gives the prophecy out. So they know they've got to find him. So she's found him. She's found them. She thinks it's one of these three, as you said earlier. She's pretty sure it's Rand. And yeah, later on you realise that this has been planned all along. And man, do those two Aes Sedai pay a heavy price for their for driving this mission forward.
Yeah, she's hardly been back to the White Tower in the 20 years that Rand's been alive, has she? She's kind of been looking all around the world for Rand or whoever she thinks it is, and then yeah, she ends up in the Two Rivers, and this is it. We see him finally being found. So yeah.
And another really amazing part of this is obviously there's one of my favourite parts of these first 11 chapters is Moraine. It's quite a long story, but she talks about Manetherin. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but this area where the three rivers from. Do you sort of take us through those sort of parallels and stuff?
Definitely. Lan kind of comes in to Rand, who's just kind of speaking to Tam once he's recovered from being injured in his bed, and they're actually talking. And Lan's like, "Come out here! You got to come out here." The villagers have kind of surrounded Moiraine, and she's like, "Is this how kind of low you've all fallen? That the blood of Manetherin is this what it's come to? Because it was such a strong force in times gone by." So before Two Rivers was Two Rivers, although everyone in the Two Rivers kind of knows it only as the Two Rivers, it was Manetherin, this kind of mountain home, mountain kingdom that was really strong and kind of held out longer against the dark, like against the shadow, than other kingdoms were able to. And so we've got these lovely parallels. Egwene's from the Two Rivers, and you might see her as Queen Eldraine, who is able to use the power. And yeah, there's a use of balefire, we think, which got used loads in the previous ages, far too much actually. You parallel that with Egwene almost finding the cure for balefire right at the end in the final battle when Taim or Mahale has been using so much balefire, she kind of manages to just use the flame of Tar Valon, which has not been around or is only discovered by Egwene, and it's what's needed. Basically, balefire used to kill everything, but Egwene, she's badass as well. She finally finds the thing in the final battle that solves that problem. Yeah, and you see Manetherin in the resilience of Two Rivers folk. They kind of, it's said that they kind of could teach kind of donkeys stubbornness and stones as well. At the same time, they're kind of so resilient. When the Trollocs have attacked them, they're all going around thinking, right, we'll rebuild and things like that. So maybe that spirit of Manetherin, how strong it was, is still there today in the Two Rivers folk as well. And finally, there's definitely some foreshadowing to later battles. So they are such a force in the final battle, the Two Rivers archers particularly, and that makes you wonder whether the strength of that kingdom of Manetherin was kind of built on the back of that, and then that's kind of come through in their bloodlines to the Two Rivers folk being such good archers as well. So Ollie, do you want to take us into ta'veren a little bit?
Yeah, so ta'veren, yeah, so that is a concept that's introduced in these early chapters, and basically they are a ta'veren is someone who manipulates the pattern, and their presence itself can bend events and people around them and make really weird things happen. A good example of a historic ta'veren was Arta to Hawkwing, who was supposed to be one of the strongest ones previously. But you see kind of some of their events, some of their actions in these early chapters. And again, we're not sure exactly if these are bending the pattern, but Matt's pranks are there, Perrin's thoughtfulness, Rand's chance encounter with the Black Rider, um, how much of this is their tavern is up for debate. But later on, they're attacked by bubbles of evil, which I think are kind of coming around them because they're Taviran that's happening there. And I think that there's some bits when Rand starts going into real absolute god mode where his presence in the city makes crazy things happen. So like a baby will fall out of a window and not die, but then an innocuous injury will result in death and things. So he's kind of like, really bending the pattern around. And I think ultimately, the Dark One finds out that, I think probably from Padden Fane, I think that there are these three Taverin there, make some targets, and so that's why they send the Shadow Spawn, all the Dark Friends. Well, Padden Fane, sorry, the Dark Friend and the Shadow Spawn, all the Trollocs and the Fades to attack them. And obviously they go through the ways, so kind of we don't know anything about the ways in these first 7 chapters. But then you just get for these three central characters, you see hints of their future. So Perrin, thoughtful reflection, but he's going to be a wolf brother. And then Matt's roguish charm and curiosity, that kind of sets him up to be this kind of like luckiest man in the world. And the absolute amazing battle, it's true general. And then Rand just is, he is the man. The story is about him. And the Dragon Reborn.
You mentioned Perrin. We talked about how kind of almost small as a character he seems compared to the other two. You see less of him, but then they're all talking about the winter that they've had and wolves coming down from the mountains. Haven't So there's a tiny little parallel where people are a little bit afraid of wolves, and Perrin's like, "Oh, wolves," like that. And then later, Wolf Brother. Yeah. So you pick up on what you said there. It's definitely Jordan knew. Jordan knows everything.
He knows everything, and I think you definitely miss it the first time you read these books or listen to them. But I think if we just one final little bit of discussion is, I think the first confirmed sighting of Rand channeling happens in these first 11 chapters. But of course, when it happens, you have no idea. There are clues there when you reread it and you know it's coming. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you kind of see Moiraine, don't you? Chapter 11. They've been fleeing the Shadow Spawn, the Trollocs, and they get away from them, but they have to run these horses like really fast, and they're all like lathered and they're all really tired. And Moiraine goes around and heals them or gives them more energy again, and she kind of goes to Bella and she's like, says to them all later, I didn't need to do anything for Bella. She was already she could have run, all night kind of thing. And that's because Rand, unknowingly, in willing Bella to run faster, because I think Egwene's on Bella, isn't she? Oh, yeah. And he doesn't want her to be dragged behind because this kind of horse is used to being like pack horse kind of thing, not as fast as the other mounts that they've got. He just wills Bella on, and kind of there he's channeling and he's giving Bella strength, and Bella's like fine, where the rest of the horses are all kind of totally needing some attention from Moiraine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think it's also, I quite like this with Bella as well, because she's not like your big stallion or your big war horse. She is just a kind of a shepherd's horse from the Two Rivers, and she's not a race horse. But yet, actually, despite she's healed by, she sort of, her tiredness is taken away by Rand in this first channeling, but she also is actually pretty awesome as a horse. And I think he's got a lot of respect for the little guy, hasn't he? And I think what's really interesting as well, there's really clever later on when there's a kind of real juxtaposition, which again, of course, you miss. But in this very book, Moraine describes what happens when you first channel to Nynaeve to say to her, and then Nynaeve is going, "Oh my god, yeah, all those things happened to me." I think she healed Egwene or someone, didn't she? Who was literally dying of breakbone fever, and so Moraine is describing to Nynaeve what the symptoms are when you first channel, and then in the same chapter, Rand is exhibiting those same ones. So he's sort of like he gets really, he wonders, he shows his sword to the White Cloaks, he gets really kind of like giddy, and then he has a fever, doesn't he? So he goes through all the symptoms. So it's just so clever. I think Robert Jordan's foreshadowing of this. But yeah, I think it's pretty much in the fandom accepted that that's the first first time he channels, but there are some other bits where you could argue that he's calm in the Trolloc attack, and maybe he's sort of channeling then. But the one that I think Robert Jordan has confirmed is that Bella moment.
By putting a chapter on it, almost like identifying when we think it happened. To me, in like fourth reread, I'm kind of going back through earlier, thinking surely I can find another instance where Rand might have done something that's a little bit like channeling, but yeah, I didn't. So yeah, chapter 11 is probably as good as any, isn't it?
You know, we've had lots of fun. I mean, that's. I hope you've enjoyed watching the second episode of Brothers in Time. We've managed to cover chapters 1 to 11 of the Eye of the World. I'm really enjoying this, Lou.
Yeah. It's been so much fun talking about this. This one seems like a long one tonight, but yeah.
Yeah, and I have no idea how long or how many episodes this will take us to do this, but I think by doing sort of chunks together like this, sort of 11, 10, 11 chapters each, I mean, we'll be able to do each book in five or six goes. So hopefully, you know, we'll be able to kind of get to it. And I think we'll get a bit slicker, but we're definitely not going to stop.
And if you enjoy this episode, make sure you follow us so you don't miss a thing.
And let us know, what was your favourite part of this section of the Eye of the World? Did we miss anything? Is there any other foreshadowing that you want to call out? Put it in the comments.
Until next time,
May you always find water and shade.